When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there. Good morning, listeners of Join Up Dots. How are you all? I hope you're feeling good. I hope you're feeling motivationally charged, because we're going to try and deliver a show that really will get you running into your offices if you're in an office and saying to your employers, there's a better way of operating. It doesn't have to be like this. We can enjoy ourselves. We can channel our passions into more creativity and more productivity and just love it, because today's guest has been on a bit of a journey, and he currently runs a company called Humans Working, focused on one-on-one coaching with executives and managers, team-based or even company-wide workshops and ongoing support to help companies build loyalty and create environments that people love working in. Yes, a concept that is born within the Join Up Dot story that we will bring to you today. Now, in 1997, when he was 24, he started an internet software consulting company. While he knew that it'd be fun to create software in the early days of the internet, his primary goal when starting the company was to create a fun atmosphere, a clubhouse, if you will, that people would love coming to every day. They had a successful business for 4 years, not breaking any records, but they were profitable, provided very competitive salaries, great benefits, and a really fun atmosphere. Can all good things last? Well, of course, we hope that will always be the case, but in the case of our guest, it wasn't to be, at least not in the short term. After 4 years, their biggest client, because their promised second round of funding didn't materialize, went out of business, and with no money in a company bank account, less than 500 to his name, and a payroll of 40 grand due in 2 days, it was clearly time to shutter the doors and get a bit stressed as well, I imagine. He summoned the team of 10 guys at the time to the conference room and with tears told them that he loved them, that they'd had a great run, but it was time to go home. And that is where we will start today's show, as there is nothing like a good cliffhanger to hook you from the start. So is it wise to look at the environment before anything else, or is this going to lead to less productive professional staff? And what was the biggest learning that he's taken away from the journey so far? Well, let's find out as we bring onto the show, to start joining up dots, with the one and only Naphtali Visser. Good morning, Naph. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
It is great to have you here. I tell you what, that is a cliffhanger, and we could go into about 9 episodes on this, but that was a good lead up. So let's get straight into it. You go into the boardroom, you say to your guys, it's been a good run. We can't do it anymore. What happened?
Yeah, so we were 10 guys at the time, and all sort of 20-something programmers, not the most loquacious guys ever. You know, they were pretty quiet usually, and whenever we had a meeting, they usually wouldn't say much of anything. So here I am standing in front of them, practically crying, and they're just kind of all sitting there, stunned a bit that I've told them to go home. There's no other option. And so one guy at the table who kind of had a reputation as being a bit of a wise ass, he said, I'll stay. And I didn't really know if he was being a wise ass or if he was being nice or what was going on. And I kind of just blew him off. And I said, thanks for your kindness, but whatever. And then the next guy at the table said, yeah, I'll stay too. And then the next guy said, yeah, you'll come up with something. You always do. And basically one at a time, they all said, we'll stay. They said, we're not going anywhere. And, I was just kind of dumbfounded. I didn't really know what it meant. I didn't know if they were all just sort of wrapped up in the adrenaline of the moment of everybody else saying they'd stay. And I said, all right, guys, I don't really know what this means. I don't really know what there is to do, but if that's what you guys want, whatever. Let's just see what happens. And so the next day, sure enough, 9 a.m., they all showed up as if, business as usual. And for 2 months, they all worked for free. And to be quite honest, I'm not exactly sure what they did. But I do know that we sent out dozens of proposals. And long story short, in this 2-month period, we got our biggest contract ever. So quite a bit bigger than any other contract we got in the 4 years prior. And because of that, we were able to find a buyer for our company, kind of a similarly sized company that acquired ours. And in the sale of the company, the only things that I negotiated were that everybody had to come along as a group. They couldn't cherry pick who they wanted to come along, and that everybody had to get a raise, which at the time was kind of crazy because it was right before 9/11, and there was a lot of layoffs. Even programmers were getting laid off left and right. So they said if you want people to get a raise, you're out of your mind. And in a moment of inspiration, I just kind of said, well, that's kind of the deal, and you need me more than I need you, which was obviously not true, but that was what had to be done for everybody to get a raise. So that's what happened. And since then, this was quite a while ago now, but since then, that story, that experience, if you will, was so transformational for me that I just have really wanted to help companies see what it is that they can do to create environments like this. So combining that experience with a lot of learning that I've had since then and my other experiences in much larger organizations, I've kind of come up with a plan or a process, which is actually sort of an anti-process, if you will, to help companies kind of create environments like this.
Well, what was fantastic about that story, and there was only many parts that I wanted to jump in, was the fact that you stood there and you said, there's no other choice. And your guys said, you always come up with something. Now, a few years down the line, do you sort of go, well, actually, yeah, I think there always is. Because building a business is hard. There's no getting away from it. And we all have those moments when we're sitting somewhere and we've got a beer in front of us and thinking, I don't know what to do next. I just don't know what to do. And I always say a story that I heard with the Beatles, when the Beatles were right at the beginning and they were going from rubbish club in the United Kingdom to rubbish club, and they were being ferried around in a rubbish van. One of them used to get depressed, maybe two of them would get depressed, but somebody would always say, something will happen. And it always did. They say there was always something that would come along. Do you see that differently now? Would you have stood in that room now with your experience and go, there is no other choice? Or would you have gone, look, guys, need your help. Let's brainwave. Let's see if we can get something going.
Yeah, I think now I definitely see the power of having a quiet mind, right? So when this thing was going on, it just felt like the world was, closing in on me at a very, very rapid pace. And my head was spinning and there was just no way to think my way out of it, right? Now, as, a programmer or software engineer or entrepreneur or whatever, I'd like to think that I'm relatively clever and I can sort of think my way out of anything. And the thing that I think that I've recognized most since then is that you can't. And in fact, it's the opposite, right? The more that your mind is quiet, the more that something is going to show up. And where that shows up from, I mean, that's just way above my pay grade. But I have come to recognize that it does show up consistently when you allow yourself to be quiet. And this can be in technical problems. If when I was writing software a lot, sometimes I would just think that the problem I was working on was impossible to figure out. And then once I got started, it just became really easy. It was like, I don't know, and again, where that comes from, who knows, but who cares? I just have come to trust the system a whole lot more.
Well, let's play some words that really emphasize that. We're going to ram that home, the quiet mind. Here's Oprah.
The way through the challenge is to get still and ask yourself, what is the next right move? Not think about, I got all of this stuff. What is the next right move? And then from that space, make the next right move and the next right move. And not to be overwhelmed by it because your life is bigger than that one moment. You're not defined by what somebody says is a failure for you, because failure is just there to point you in a different direction.
So she talks about being quiet, but I see that as a problem for many of my listeners out there. They are listening to podcasts, they're commuting to jobs that they don't like, and they're looking for inspiration, motivation to change direction. But there's too much choice out there, and they don't know. They can't find the answer. Now, in your website, which I was looking at, you were quite openly saying that the answer's always within you, and it doesn't matter whether it's a company or a person. The answer's you've got to work inside out to get there. Is there a sort of a step-by-step process that somebody can use on themselves, Nath, before they actually go in and try to change a company? Is it better to do the individual first, then the company, or the company, then the individual?
So you're asking sort of for an executive, an owner of a company?
Anyone out there,
Yeah.
if they want to transform their life in a way, do they always have to start inside out? And on the bigger sense, with individuals in a company, does it still start with individuals before a company can change?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the distinction that I want to make is that there isn't a way to start inside out or outside in, if you will. What I'm sort of describing is just how the system works, meaning we're always creating our realities from the inside out. It's just what's happening. So, it's kind of like gravity. Whether you believe in it or not, it's just what's happening. And so the more that we recognize that this is what's happening, well, then that has implications into what we can do. So I'll give you an example. In companies where there is bad morale, say, often it is perceived that the reason that there's bad morale is because the boss is a jerk, right? Or all the people in the the product development department are a bunch of jerks and they're all arrogant and they don't know what they're talking about and blah blah blah, and they make everybody else's life so difficult. But when you recognize that that is an impossibility, right? It is impossible for us to feel a certain way because of what somebody else is saying or doing or any other circumstance. When you just recognize that the reason that you're feeling crappy has nothing to do with anything else that's going on, the budget, the people, the circumstances, the fact that your lunch was horrible, it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with the fact that you're having crappy thinking in the moment. And what do you do to fix this thinking? Absolutely nothing. It goes away by itself. The same way that when there's, it's a cloudy, overcast day, well, you don't have to do anything about it. And the universe doesn't do anything about it. The clouds just pass. And I feel like so many people spend so much of their time trying to get to this place of happiness or fulfillment or whatever. And anytime that they're in a state that seems like it's opposite to that, they get even more down because they're not in this happy state all the time. And there's an ebb and flow to our moods. There's an ebb and flow to everything. And that lower state, if you will, is just as natural as that upper state. So recognizing that things will change, and that your experience is coming from within you, not from things on the outside. And when I've taught this to executives, to individuals, things just seem to change miraculously from that understanding.
It's a very Buddhist principle that you're talking about, isn't it, really?
I think there's definitely pieces of it in Buddhism, or pieces of Buddhism in it. But I think maybe one of the distinctions, and not to get too theological about it, but is just that, we don't need to be conscious of our thoughts, right? Like what we're thinking. We don't need to, like the term mindfulness, right? To kind of have a kind mindset, for example, or something like that. It doesn't really matter what we're thinking, just that we're thinking, right? Our experience is coming from the fact just that there's hundreds of thousands of thoughts that are passing through our head all the time. And when we recognize that that's all that's happening, there's just a bunch of thoughts passing through our head and our experience is caused from them. We don't really need to figure out what any of those thoughts are, right? We all have thoughts all the time. You have thoughts about your family, you have thoughts about work, you have thoughts about your future, you have thoughts about your past, you have thoughts about, some lady you might like to date. You have all these things, but we don't need to sort through them. That process happens on its own. The mind is really wired for calmness. And like a pond, right? This is a common metaphor. once you drop a stone in a pond, or you take a stick and you dig up all the mud in the pond, and you've got this murky water, there's nothing to do to settle the pond other than wait, right? There's no magnet that you can put on the surface of the water, or an iron, or you can't boil the water. You just wait, and its natural state is one of calm. And I absolutely see that in myself and others, that calm and creativity and love and kindness, they're all very natural states of the mind. And when we don't pile on this crap on top of that natural state of fear, and what is the right thing that I'm supposed to be doing? What's my life's purpose? What if this thing doesn't work out? When we don't pile all that stuff on there, things just start to become so much easier.
So how do you build a business around this? Because I've worked in the City of London for many, many years. And I'll be honest, if you came into our office, I would say probably 95% of them would show you the door. They're just not ready for what you're offering. How do you actually get this message through so that you can actually show how it will change the morale in the office? Because companies, and certainly middle management, they're just closed off, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think, we are bombarded with messages of, try harder, just run into the brick wall 1,000 times and eventually it'll fall down. But I seem to think that there's a better, easier way, right? And
look for the door.
Look for the door. Yeah, or the hole in the wall, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But I think it is very hard to see something when you've been told the opposite all your life, right? We've been told all the time that you're feeling bad because somebody yelled at you, or because your bank account isn't big enough, or whatever it is. So, what I try to do now is not describe what I do. I try to just work with people, and in 15 minutes or a couple hours, just talk to them about what's on their mind and what's challenging them. And usually in relatively short order, I can get them to see something different. And through that, sometimes they say, I want to hang out with you some more. Can we do that? And that's sort of my sales process.
So how do you change the morale of a company? I have been into places that I remember working for a company in London, and I won't say what the name of the company was, but literally as soon as you opened the door, there was a small room that I was based in, and there must have been no more than about 10 people in there, probably about 8. And the atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife. It was like going to work. And every now and again, somebody would jump up and start shouting and screaming at somebody out the other end of the desk, and then they'd have an argument, and then it would calm down. But all the time there was this feeling of it was going to go. How can you sort of change that morale when it's not just one person, it's a whole team, it's a whole company?
Right. That's a super, super question. And I would say for a long time after the experience with my company, the story that we shared earlier, I thought that if I could teach companies the things that we did, meaning we had really good benefits, we had nice salaries, we had a great atmosphere to work in, meaning it was a very cool office space, we had company lunches, we had some company outings, I had no rules around what tools people could use or when they had to come to work, and pretty much an open vacation policy and all this kind of stuff. And I thought that if I taught people all of these things, right, or the value of all of these things, and they implemented them, then their culture would be one that mirrored the one that we had, right, that had great loyalty and people really wanted to work and stuff like that. So since then, I've come to understand that probably not much could be further from the truth. And this points to the same thing that I was just talking about, that our experience never comes from the outside, right? So just as I cannot be affected by somebody yelling at me, say, I can't be affected by a free lunch or a great benefits package or anything like that. So to answer your question, to me, the way to improve morale is to have more people in the company understand this inside-out nature, if you will, to understand where problems come from. So if I go into a company, people that do similar work to me that try to do this sort of culture improvement, say, might go in and do a survey of everybody at the beginning of the project and ask everybody essentially, how happy are you on, these 10 different points on this 10 point scale, whatever. I ask explicitly or implicitly, where do you think problems come from? And the more that people think that problems come from the outside, generally the crappier the culture is. The more that people see what's really happening, and the more that people see that, when that jerk in accounting, ruins your day, that's not actually what happened. And all you need to do to make that crappy feeling go away is wait a minute, right? Then, well, geez, morale kind of never gets bad in the first place. And really, like I said, this natural state of the mind is one of calmness and love and caring and understanding. And so, the metaphor that I use is kind of the boat always drifts back to shore, right? That if you're just doing nothing, it just kind of drifts back to shore. And so we don't really need to do anything to fix it because nothing's broken in the first place other than the fact that people are thinking that the problems are coming from somewhere that they're not.
Yeah, but people always sit in offices moaning and groaning, and you can go to any bar on a Friday night and it's full of people basically griping about their work situation. I have worked in a few companies that the morale was brilliant, and I've worked in the majority of companies when the morale was just what it was. It was just a company, and every now and again people would have a moan off, and other times it wasn't. I totally understand what you're saying, but I don't know with the people I've worked with whether they would buy into this. I think they are always looking for a scapegoat. They're always looking to point a finger. They're always saying, it's because of that guy in accountancy. It's because I haven't had a break for 4 years. It's because of this. And they're always, with that pointy business, they're pointing externally. Totally against what you're saying, but although I understand totally what you're saying, and I agree with it, but I just know whether I've worked, people are always looking for something that they can say, it's not me.
You're right. And as I said, there seems to be a correlation between not just morale, but the ability to innovate or be creative and this understanding, right? So I'll give you another example or another that, innovation and creativity comes from the same place, right? It comes from the same place of our natural state. It comes from the same place as love, which is why, babies and don't need to ever be told how to be creative. If you give a 1-year-old some crayons, they'll make something out of it. They don't worry about does this look good? Is this the right thing to draw? What should I draw? Is this the right, is this, I don't, I'm thinking I want to draw something, but I don't really know what it is. And they don't have that problem, right? And so this understanding that we'll all be fine no matter what, right? We're never affected by anything on the outside. And even if our businesses fail or we don't come up with a great idea, we're going to be fine. This is the concept of resilience, right? We're always going to bounce back. And by the very nature of the fact that we're all still here, it means that any challenge that any of us has faced in our life, we've found a way through the tunnel and got to the other side. So, to be innovative it's not a thing. It just means, you have these ideas. Sometimes an idea comes to you in a dream or in the shower, and you have this brilliant idea, and you go to work and you sketch it down, and you've got this, brand new product. And sometimes you have, a little zygote of an idea, and you start working on it. And once you start, you take the first step towards it, kind of as Oprah said. You take the first step towards it, and then the next step becomes obvious. And you take the next step, and the next step becomes obvious. But man, sitting in your cubicle, banging your head against the wall, wondering what's going to be what is this thing going to turn into at the end? Or how do I picture a perfectly formed product or solution or website strategy or anything? Man, that's generally a recipe for disaster.
So are we saying here, just to jump in, are we saying that by allowing staff to be creative and almost allowing staff to take extra responsibility, make their own mistakes, but feel part of it, feel that they're actually helping grow this company instead of just being a cog. Is that how morale really starts shifting? I was really sort of inspired by the word creativity as you were speaking.
Yeah, that's an awesome question too. Yes, to answer your question in the short way, yes, we need to make people feel as part of it, but that does not come from some sort of strategy as to how to make them feel more part of it. So let me see if I can make that a little more clear. Some companies would hear what you just suggested and say, okay, we're going to make a plan around employee, engagement or inclusion. And every time we have a meeting, we're going to invite anybody who wants to come. And anytime we have a plan, we're going to invite comments from everybody or something like this, right? And because we do that, then the morale is going to be good. And I would say kind of that the more that we just understand that we don't need to control the process, right? That creativity is in everyone, not just the people that we call creative, and that the ability to fail or the permission to fail, if you will, is just a natural thing. It's not even something that we need to do. And the more that we just sort of recognize that life is just kind of flowing and we don't need to control it as much as we think, that when things go wrong, they generally have a way of righting themselves. And that when we just loosen the reins a little bit, that this creativity just sort of more naturally comes out of everybody without having to do anything, like I said, like more brainstorming or more, soliciting comments from anybody, just recognizing that we don't need to be in control as much as we think we do.
We just have to do.
Does that answer the question?
It does. And I'll give you an example of myself. This is my show after all. But in Join Up Dots, at the very beginning, I basically almost killed myself, slogging it. And I thought I could outwork every single person. And the first year I could do it because I got the energy left from my corporate gig. I wasn't sort of worn out. The second year, I started to fall to pieces where I just couldn't keep going. So I thought, it's not going to work. Now I do barely anything on my show and it's just going up naturally. You could argue it was all the effort I put in at the beginning, but I'm now looking at stuff and I'm doing the right things and I'm not forcing it. I'm just kind of like a sheep herder, just kind of whistling every now and again and pointing in the right direction, and I can just see the path in front of me and where we're going. And I do think that the majority of things, and it comes, in all life, being relaxed, being focused on the enjoyment is when peak performance comes along. It doesn't matter what it is. You could be in bed with your perfect partner, and if you're all stressed and let's get this over with as soon as possible, it's going to be rubbish. But if you just kind of relax into it and you just do it, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, more often than not, it does. So I agree with you totally, sir.
Yeah, you alluded to like a romantic relationship here, and I before I got married about a year ago, I was on the online dating sites and going on a whole lot of dates, most of which didn't last through dinner. But the more that I recognized that as I was going on a date and thinking about it the whole time, like, what's this going to lead to? Do they like me? All this, like all these thoughts, man, the more it was a horrible experience. And the more that I just showed up, literally just kind of showed up and said, here I am. Let's see what happens. Man, they usually went pretty well. That doesn't mean they ended exactly where I wanted them to or any of those things, but they usually were more fun and more lighthearted, and we got to experience more of each other in the real each other, if you will, not the sort of made up persona that we put on when we go on dates. And that seems, that's what life is about, right? That's what life is about is human connection. And so just to point this back to business, if we're doing sales, for example, right, there's so many strategies that are around customer relationship management systems, or, how do we cold call better and stuff like that. And we, maybe we're just kind of trying to do the wrong thing better. And maybe the sales process is not about how many people you can call or how well you can target your customer, but instead just being able to connect with people more on a human level, right? And again, how do we do this? Well, ask them about their kids. And then this becomes a strategy. And then because it didn't come from inside of you, it came from somewhere else, it becomes very fake, right? You're like, well, I see on this piece of paper here, I'm supposed to ask you about your kids. So do you have any kids? And it just becomes really awkward, right? But when we actually are curious and actually want to get into somebody else's world, well, then people buy from you not because they love your thing, but more because they love you.
So you're fascinating them. You're selling by being fascinating yourself. It's a two-way street. And I suppose what Oprah said at the very beginning was, you're not defined by your next decision. If you go on a date, you're not defined if it works or not. You just go on a date, and if it works, and the next company you go to, it may not work out for you. You may actually decide you don't like it, but you just... And I suppose it's a metaphor of join up dots, that there's no experience wasted. Everything you do leads you to a point where it comes together. You look back and you go, oh, I can see how I got here because the dots have joined up. But you're just allowing those experiences to lead towards something.
Yeah, and if I look back at my life as to how I got here, I mean, yes, of course, all the dots join up. But if I had tried to make that map, before, 30 years ago, I mean, there's no way in hell that I would have made that map. I went to college absolutely convicted and convinced that I would become an orthopedic surgeon. I mean, I had that dream for forever. And 2 years into it, I mean, I realized I was not cut out to be a doctor. And I kind of liked computers, so I took a computer class, and then I graduated with a computer science degree at the time that the World Wide Web was starting. I worked on one of the first 3 .com websites in the world. And I just was sort of in the right place at the right time. And that led to, working at a couple of really big agencies and working on some of the first versions of some very, very large brands. And then that led to starting my company. And then that led to, this business that I have now. But I mean, and there was a whole lot of, weird missteps in there. I started a fashion consulting company at one point. I mean, there was, that failed miserably. But to me, that's the fun part of life is going, not to be cliche, but it really is about the journey. If you just pick a destination and go in a straight line, it's kind of boring.
Well, let's play some words that say that perfectly. And he created the whole theme of the show, no longer with us, but his words are Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
Ties up perfectly, doesn't it, Nath?
It does. I think he said it a little bit better than I did.
He says it better than all of us. It's one of those words, those speeches that will stay with us forever. So when you look back on your life, obviously you are here now, and you've already mentioned the big boardroom speech when your guys stood up and said, we'll stay with you, we'll stay with you. Is there a big dot in your life that you could say, without that occurring, I wouldn't be here now?
I mean, honestly, I think, my divorce. I mean, it's not probably something that a lot of people aspire to, and not that I would suggest it for anyone, but I think it was through that process that I really started to see a lot more of how life works, if you will. And it's going to be difficult to dig into that too much, but again, something that when I got married the first time, I would have done anything to avoid getting divorced, right? I mean, I had this, everybody gets married and thinks they're going to be together forever. And then, this horrible thing just sort of shows up. but at the time, it seemed like the worst thing that could possibly happen in my life or anybody's life. And just seeing that it kind of wasn't that bad and that there was kind of a pretty easy path through it, I'd say that really has helped me a lot as well. So, moving forward, knowing that I can start a business, I can get married, I can do just about anything. And no matter what happens, I'll be fine, right? That, as one of my mentors says, once you realize that there's no bullets, you don't need to keep piling on bulletproof vests. And so, yeah, that's a pretty good one.
And what you sound very relaxed. You sound very chilled out. Are there times when you're going, for God's sake, I can't believe this happened? Or are you kind of like the Zen-like character that we're getting on the show today?
Probably, I mean, more the calm person. And I think that has come, I used to get pretty frazzled. But the more that I've recognized that whole frazzleness, if you will, is only coming from me, the more that I just naturally become more chill, if you will, right? That I don't meditate. I don't study Buddhism. I don't study techniques of how to be calm. Just things just naturally. The more that I see this inside out nature of things, that we're creating that frazzled state, the less it just happens naturally, right? The less that I get frazzled naturally. I'll give you a good example. I was at this company when I was working at a company, and my boss brought me in his office, and we'd had a disagreement on something, and I'm sitting in this chair, and he's sitting behind his desk. We're on opposite sides of the desk, and I say something that pisses him off, and he stands up, and he's like 6'4", 300 pounds. I'm like 5'3", and like sitting in this chair, and he walks over and stands next to me, and he's screaming at me so much that like spit is coming out of his mouth, and he's screaming, like, I'm not going to take any crap from you. And just, I mean, and I was like, if I said to myself, like, if you're going to hit me, I'm probably in trouble, but otherwise, what do you think that I haven't heard people yell before? And I couldn't help but just start giggling and laughing, which just completely diffused the situation. I mean, he kind of got angrier inside, but he knew that there was, I was bulletproof, right? And that there was nothing he could do to sort of scare me or persuade me or whatever whatever he was trying to do. And where did that come from? It just came from knowing that, like, come on, what's going to happen? All right, you're going to fire me? You're going to, tell my mother that I was a bad boy? What are you going to do? And, similarly, I got mugged in Detroit a couple years ago. I was there photographing, and just in the moment, I saw this guy walking towards me with a gun, and I was like, all right, well, there's about 20 seconds till he gets here, and so figure it out. That's all you got to do. And, you're not going to fight him. You're not going to shoot him. So figure something else out. And we kind of had a nice chat, kind of like this one, and it worked itself out pretty well. But I don't really know where that comes from either. I know it's not me. I know it's not my brain. It comes from somewhere else, but again, it's above my pay grade to say where that is.
As you saying, it ties us right up to the sort of Beatles story at the beginning. Something happens. Just figure it out. You're not defined. You can just move on. I think this episode is an absolute masterclass for anybody out there who is in a situation at work where morale's not good, where you can realize that actually you're not part of that. You can separate yourself from that if you want. You can choose to be annoyed. You can choose to be frazzled. You can choose to be whatever you want, but you're not part of that situation. And I can see your business going from strength to strength, sir, because I think there is a movement away from certainly the experience that I used to have in corporate land, where people actually are aware now that their greatest commodity is staff, and it's not a conveyor belt. You train people up, you want them to stay with you, and the best way of them doing that is by having better morale and not just layering on benefits that people don't want. It does all come down to morale and feeling worthy, doesn't it?
It does. And people will stay because they want to stay, not because you give them reasons to stay, right? There is absolutely no reason you can give somebody to stay. You can't give them more money. You can't give them more benefits. You can't give them more responsibility, a better title, free lunch, anything like that. People will stay because they feel it within themselves to stay. So all you need to do is cultivate that understanding that is what that inside nature, if you will make them stay. So you just keep building that in every aspect of your business, building that inside out nature. And people will either stay or they won't, but it's out of your control. And to me, the more that if somebody wants to leave, that they say, hey, I want to go to a different kind of job, a bigger position, whatever it is, the more that you not only encourage them, but help them. And that, again, I don't want to put too fine a point on it that of karma or something like that, but it seems to come back, right? It seems that sort of behavior, if you will, pays back in spades.
Well, this is almost the end of the show, and this is the part that we've been building up to, that we call a sermon on the mic, when we are going to send you back in time to have a one-on-one with your younger self. And if you could go back in time and speak to the young Nath, what age would you choose and what advice would you give? Well, we're going to find out, because I'm going to play the theme, and when it fades, you're up. This is the sermon on the mic.
With the best bit of the show, the sermon on the mic, the sermon on the mic.
So I think I would say I would probably point back to my childhood, maybe say, 12, 15 years old, as we start to experience the angst of life, right? The teenage angst, and not only the stuff around, that our parents are annoying and girls and college and all that kind of stuff, but where is my life going, right? And what does it all mean and all that kind of stuff. And I would really tell myself sort of all that what we've been talking about here, right? About this inside out nature, but also that no matter what happens, you really will be fine. And the joy of life really comes from doing something, not trying to figure out what to do, because we have no idea what we will feel like in the future, right? We often tell ourselves, oh, once I have a successful business, then I'll be happy. Once I have a wife, a family, a career, a certain bank account, etc. And we just never know what we're going to feel. And so, I think that's the only thing is to really, I would try to convey this inside out nature. And as I think about my own kids, which I don't have yet, but would love to soon, that's what I will try to share with them. Above everything else is just this inside out nature.
Great stuff. So what's the number one best way that our audience who've been listening today and are interested in changing the morale in their own businesses and their own selves, how can I connect with you?
The website's pretty great. There's a bunch of content there. It's humansworking.co. And you can email me at naf, N-A-F, at humansworking.co.
Right, well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots. And please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because I do believe that by joining up the dots and connecting our past, it's the best way to build our futures. Naphtali Visser, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
So if you're in a company and the morale's not good, where do you look? Do you point at him? Do you point at them? Do you point at situations, or do you point into yourself and just think, I'm allowing this to affect me? There's a lot of truth there. There really is. In business, you're pushing. And when you leave it behind, and more often than not, when you go on vacation, you come back and you find that certain things have just occurred like magic because you've sort of let it go somewhat. Let it go. Hopefully you won't let Join Up Dots go and you will be back for another episode coming shortly. But until then, this was David Ralph. That was Join Up Dots, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers. See ya. Bye-bye.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.